Hello everyone, Ariam here, and welcome back to another episode of Draw and Discuss. Today we're going to be breaking down the topic of Spinosaurus and its evolution throughout the years, not in terms of the actual animal evolving, but our understanding of how it looked and may have lived. Obviously, as science progresses in any field, things that we may have thought to be true in the past are disproven, and we learn more about our world as technology advances as well. We didn't used to have a super great grasp on how dinosaurs were put back together and how they may have looked when they were alive. And potentially this could still be said of today. We really can't prove too much of our guesses on what dinosaurs looked like. Unless it is one of those very rare situations where an entire skeleton is fossilized together, an entire animal is preserved almost perfectly, or skin indentations leave pigment behind in rock formations, we really don't know a lot about how dinosaurs would have really looked in their living form. And as technology and science progresses, those ideas can change. This often means that the way we thought a dinosaur looked in the 60s is very different from how we think it looks today. The obvious thing is pointing out that we didn't know that dinosaurs had feathers to some degree until fairly recently in terms of paleontological history. But the dinosaur that has undergone the most revisions throughout its history being studied has to be the Spinosaurus. This thing has gone through more evolutions within a short frame of time than pretty much any other animal. So let's talk about what we have from the Spinosaurus, what we know, and what we don't know. So the first problem is that we do not have any one full, complete Spinosaurus skeleton, and we don't really have all that many partial specimens either. Only around 6 confirmed partial skeletons of Spinosaurus have been described and proven to be Spinosaurus. Now, there are bits and pieces that have been found that are believed to be in the Spinosaurus family, but it's not confirmed whether it's Spinosaurus aegypticus or something else. So, scientists are already working from a pretty sparse foundation here, but thankfully some things are not necessarily proven, because all these things are still always up for question, but some things about Spinosaurus are believed generally to be considered true. One of the things largely considered to be true is that Spinosaurus was one of the largest theropod dinosaurs ever, in competition with animals like Tyrannosaurus rex and Giganotosaurus for top predator. Not to say that these dinosaurs were directly competing, they lived in different time periods and areas across the Earth, and even if they did live in the same general time and area, they probably would have had different environmental niches. I just mean in competition based on size. The exact height, weight, and length of Spinosaurus is not known, again because we only have partial remains, and we don't know if from those remains, those were an outlier dinosaur that would have been way bigger or way smaller than the average, if the dinosaur was done growing, etc. One of the more recent estimates from 2022 suggested that Spinosaurus would have been around 45 feet long and around 8 tons. So it is still believed to be really, really large, although again, these studies have been going on forever and this weight and length does vary a little bit. We also are fairly certain that Spinosaurus had a sail on its back, although the exact purpose of this sail is again undetermined. Spinosaurus had really long neural spines or neural crests, which means the top part of its backbones were really extended, suggesting that this allowed for support for some sort of bodily structure, like a sail. There is a very small subsection of people that believe that this actually was a hump instead, because these neural crests are similar to those seen in bison, which have a hump and not a sail, but generally speaking, a sail is the consensus. Like I mentioned, the exact purpose of this sail is unknown. The main theory is that this provided more skin surface area for thermoregulation. This would allow sun rays to hit the sail and warm up the blood of the Spinosaurus, or for the sail to be exposed to wind or cold water in order to cool the animal down. Another idea that could be used separately or in coordination with the thermal regulation idea is that the sail was used for display purposes, either to show off for a potential mate or to warn potential competition, hey, look, I'm big and tough and you don't want to mess with me. We are also fairly sure that Spinosaurus lived at least a semi-aquatic lifestyle, for several reasons. Based on several partial and fragmented skulls that have been found, it's believed that Spinosaurus would have had a long, narrow snout. And generally, snouts like this are used in animals that at least partially feed on fish. Think of something like a crocodile or a gharial. Similarly, some really complicated testing of Spinosaurus teeth showed that it was more similar in compounds to alligators, turtle beaks, and crocodilians compared to known land-dwelling theropods like Carcharodontosaurus. Additionally, Spinosaurus is believed to have relatively short legs for its body weight, and its hips were built a little bit differently than other theropods, suggesting that, kind of like shorebirds today, it was more built for walking on uneven, soft terrain like sand or mud, and may have spent a lot of time in shallow water. It's also believed, based on the vertebrae of the tail, that Spinosaurus's tail was keeled, or it was very wide and flared out, kind of like a tadpole's tail, allowing it to propel itself through the water. However, it's really unlikely that the Spinosaurus was a fully aquatic animal. Like it was believed around 2018-2019, there was a brief period where we thought maybe it didn't enter land very much at all. Its eyes are not positioned on its head like you would see on a crocodile or an alligator, so it likely wasn't an ambush hunter from the water, and its bone density suggests that it either couldn't float very well or it couldn't sink very well. There's been conflicting studies, so it's unlikely that this guy was swimming around a lot, but may have just been occupying the shoreline, not unlike a heron or a different shorebird. So if we know all that, why is Spinosaurus so controversial? Why don't we know for sure what it looked like? Well, like I mentioned previously, science and technology are advancing faster now than they ever have before. There are tests that we can run now on a skeleton or fossil that we couldn't even run 10 years ago. In essence, every era of science is doing the best it can with what it has. Scientists way back in the 50s had really no way of testing many of the things we can test for today. And so it makes sense that back then they saw bones that were reminiscent of reptiles, and they classified dinosaurs as big lumbering lizards that drug their tails everywhere, definitely didn't have feathers, and were probably pretty stupid. We know so much more now because we have the ability to test so many more hypotheses, and that opens up a lot of doors that weren't opened up previously. So this isn't a judgment on paleontologists of the past. This is simply to say that technology is moving forward so quickly that science still has to catch up. This is also why it seems like the Spinosaurus changes its look every 2 to 3 years. New tests are coming out all the time, and new papers are being published all the time. And everyone latches on to this new idea as soon as a paper is published, but just because a paper is published doesn't mean necessarily that it is supported by other evidence, and it doesn't mean that those results have been replicated by other scientists. Plus, science, unfortunately, like everything else, is an industry. Profits and grants and support really only go to those scientists who are first in line, who are first to discover something. So there's a lot of pressure to find new information out rather than to test the validity of what you found. So we just keep getting new and new papers, we keep changing Spinosaurus, and we are eventually getting closer to what we think might be a little bit more accurate, but we have to keep making tiny adjustments along the way as we go back, check for mistakes, and see if what we found 2 years ago really still applies, which a lot of the times it doesn't. This sounds a bit negative, but I happen to work in the scientific industry, and I see firsthand how oftentimes publicity and excitement drives progress forward, and we jump on publications that show something interesting more than we do publications that prove what we thought was correct in the past. So there's a lot of tiny, minute corrections that we need to be doing within the industry that maybe aren't getting done all the time. But that doesn't mean that paleontologists are just making things up. There is evidence for all the changes to Spinosaurus that have been made. We just keep having to change Spinosaurus every few years because of the new evidence that is found, disproval of evidence that was put forth in the past, and as different tests are conducted again and again to validate or disprove what we thought was going on. I really love this bit of artwork here. You can see the artist's name in the top right corner. It really shows how our interpretation of Spinosaurus has progressed from tail-dragging landlubber to something that was potentially similar to a T-Rex, which you can see from my Jurassic Park 3 iteration of the Spinosaurus on the bottom here, to something that might have been fully aquatic, and now something that might have been like a shorebird, a heron, or something similar. Spinosaurus isn't the only spinosaurid that is constantly having weird changes made about it, but it's definitely the most famous in its family and probably the most famous dinosaur overall for constantly going through visual revisions. So that pretty much wraps things up for this episode. Let me know what you think about Spinosaurus. Do you have a favorite iteration that you're sad to see is now debunked? What do you think we'll find in the future? Do you think we'll ever really settle on one version of Spinosaurus? I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, leave me recommendations below for more long-form videos in the future, and make sure to get out there and enjoy the sunshine. And remember to smile.